for about a year and identified potential candidates for the astronaut program. And it was very exciting because people who had at first thought they would not do it because they didn't think NASA was serious, became convinced because I convinced them that I was here to do this and to make this happen. And so we were successful.
So the reason why, let me just tell you the reason why this is so important, because what we're doing here in Chicago.
Long before she said her final goodbye, Nichelle Nichols, the woman who made history as Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, finally broke her silence. What she shared wasn't just a glimpse into her own life, but a revelation that peeled back the glossy exterior of a beloved sci-fi universe. For years, rumors had swirled, but now, Nichols's voice brought those whispers into sharp focus. What truly happened behind the scenes of Star Trek wasn't always futuristic harmony. Instead, it was a quiet battle for respect, fought with elegance by a woman who refused to be invisible. When Star Trek debuted in 1966, it wasn't just another TV show, it was a statement. Audiences were introduced to a future where diversity was not just present, but essential. Among the boldest symbols of this vision was Lieutenant Uhura, portrayed by Nichelle Nichols, who brought intellect and grace to every episode. There she was, clad in crimson, commanding the communications console, not as a background figure, but as a force. And for the first time, a black woman on television wasn't a servant or a silent extra. She was a core part of the story. It was revolutionary. At a time when American television painted narrow roles for women of color, Nichols broke through a wall no one even acknowledged. She wasn't a token. She was a trailblazer. To many young black viewers, especially young girls, seeing Uhura wasn't just representation, it was affirmation. This wasn't fiction, it was possibility. But that powerful image came with a private price. In her later years, Nichols confirmed what many fans had long suspected. Her experience on the set wasn't as seamless as it seemed. She faced quiet erasures, dialogue trimmed down, promotional appearances omitted, her presence sometimes minimized deliberately. The woman who helped redefine what a black woman could be on screen was, off-camera, struggling to maintain the space she had rightfully earned. Yet despite the resistance, her influence echoed far beyond the soundstage. One little girl watching TV back then was Whoopi Goldberg, who famously ran through her home yelling, "Come quick, there's a black lady on TV, and she's not a maid." That moment would stick with Goldberg for life, eventually inspiring her to join the Star Trek universe herself. Another admirer, Mae Jemison, would become the first black woman in space after being inspired by Nichols's portrayal. Nichols didn't just play a role, she opened doors in real life. Still, her journey was far from smooth. Her contributions were often undervalued. On multiple occasions, scripts reduced her dialogue to a handful of words. There was a quiet but deliberate effort to shrink her presence. Behind the polished exterior of the bridge, Nichols was fighting for visibility. To understand her strength, we have to look at where she came from. Born Grace Dell. Nichols on December 28, 1932, in Robbins, Illinois, she was raised in a working-class family. Her father, a factory worker, was also Robbins's mayor and magistrate, proof that leadership ran in her blood. She didn't like the name Grace, so her parents offered Nichelle, meaning victorious maiden. And victory indeed would become her story. She studied dance in Chicago and began performing at just 12. Touring with legends like Duke Ellington and Lionel Hampton, she dazzled audiences with her voice and movement long before Hollywood took notice. Her early roles in productions like Carmen Jones and Porgy and Bess showcased her talent. But it wasn't until Gene Roddenberry spotted her in his short-lived series The Lieutenant that the pieces began to align. Roddenberry was building something radical, a show about unity, progress, and the stars. He offered her the role of Uhura, a name derived from the Swahili word for freedom. But the freedom Nichols found on screen was challenged behind it. By the end of the first season, the weight of feeling overlooked became too heavy. She was offered a return to the stage, her first love, and decided to walk away. But just before finalizing her exit, fate intervened in a moment so surreal it could have been scripted. At a civil rights banquet, a fellow attendee asked to meet her. Expecting a fan, she turned and found herself face to face with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't just praise her performance, he told her she was vital to the movement. Her presence on TV wasn't simply entertainment, he said. It was powerful, quiet activism. It shifted public perception. It gave children hope. Nichols was stunned. In that conversation, her decision to leave was shattered. She realized she couldn't walk away. Not yet. She returned to Roddenberry, relayed what Dr. King had told her, and watched as the tough showrunner wiped away tears. He had always believed in what she represented and promised to continue supporting her. That Monday changed everything. Nichols remained on the show, and in doing so, she etched her place in history. Not just as a performer, but as a symbol of what the future could hold. Roddenberry's vision wasn't just fiction. Through Uhura, it became a promise. She didn't just survive the challenges, she transcended them. And by staying, she helped usher in a new generation of dreamers, from Hollywood to Houston. Her story reminds us that sometimes the quietest roles carry the loudest echoes. She could have walked away. Many others would have. But Nichelle Nichols, standing at the crossroads of art and activism, chose to remain. Not for fame or applause, but because she recognized something greater than herself. The bridge of the Enterprise wasn't just a sci-fi set, it had become a battleground for change, a symbol of possibility. With encouragement from Gene Roddenberry and the unwavering influence of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she understood that her role carried a message far beyond the stars. But even that strength didn't shield her from what was to come. Her journey would soon take a turn into territory few had dared tread. In 1968, television did something it rarely dared. It kissed controversy head-on. One moment, just a flicker of a scene, cracked open the boundaries of race and romance in primetime America. On an episode of Star Trek titled Plato's Stepchildren, Nichelle Nichols and William Shatner shared a kiss that would echo far beyond the screen. This wasn't just a scripted act. It was a defiant stand during a time when the nation simmered with racial tensions. The kiss was historic, not just because it crossed the color line, but because it did so with dignity, courage, and intention. Behind the scenes, tensions flared. NBC executives, wary of audience backlash, pushed hard for a version without the kiss. They feared the country wasn't ready. But Nichols and Shatner didn't back down. In fact, Shatner reportedly sabotaged every alternate take, crossing his eyes, flubbing lines, anything to make sure the network had no choice but to air the original kiss. And they did. On November 22nd, 1968, America watched something it had never quite seen before. It wasn't loud, it wasn't overdone, but it made noise that still echoes. The reaction? Not what the network expected. Instead of outrage, fan mail flooded in, much of it glowing. One letter, from a white Southern man, stood out. He admitted he didn't believe in interracial relationships, but even he couldn't deny the power of what he saw. That moment, brief as it was, nudged a nation toward something better. It said without words, "We belong here too." Interestingly, the kiss wasn't portrayed as romantic. The characters were being manipulated by alien telepathy. But to the audience, that nuance didn't matter. What mattered was the image. Black and white, side by side, sharing a human moment. And for millions watching, it stirred a sense of awakening. For Nichelle, this wasn't just another scene. It was a deeply personal milestone. Before that episode, she had already challenged norms by playing one of television's first black female characters who wasn't in a subordinate or comic role. Uhura stood tall, smart, poised, essential to the mission. And that kiss took her a step further. It made it undeniable. Black women could be loved, respected, and seen as equals on screen. Even decades later, the significance of that scene held weight. Nichols often joked about it in interviews, adding charm to its seriousness. But behind the humor was a deep understanding of what they'd accomplished. They hadn't shouted about change, they had simply walked into it, hand in hand, under the lights. After the original Star Trek series ended in 1969, Nichols could have closed that chapter. But she didn't. Her bond with the franchise ran deep. She voiced Uhura again in the animated series, shining in an episode where she took command of the Enterprise, something she'd long hoped to do during the live-action run. That moment meant more than just leadership on screen. It was a symbolic victory. Her role continued through 6 feature films, with her final appearance in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, offering fans one last salute to the character who had meant so much. In 1994, she pulled back the curtain on her journey with her autobiography, Beyond Uhura. Within its pages, she revealed missed opportunities, like the role on Mannix she never got to accept due to contractual obligations. But she never lingered on regrets. She kept moving forward. The gap between the original series and its film revivals wasn't idle time for Nichols. She explored different roles. In 1967's comedy, Dr. You've Got to Be Kidding, she played a secretary. Later, in 1974's Truck Turner, she flipped expectations with a gritty, commanding role, her only foray into the blaxploitation genre, but one that proved her range. Nichols' voice, rich and expressive, became her signature in animation. She brought characters to life in shows like Futurama, where she poked fun at her own legacy, and Gargoyles, where she gave emotional weight to the character of Diane Maza. Even in Batman the Animated Series, she added depth to mythical figures. Her voice wasn't just recognizable, it was magnetic. She also made her way into unexpected corners of pop culture. The Simpsons featured her as herself in a quirky superhero episode. In Snow Dogs, she played Cuba Gooding Jr.'s mother, another nod to her continued relevance in mainstream cinema. But perhaps the most surprising twist came in the indie film Lady Magdalene's, where she wore multiple hats: actress, producer, choreographer, and singer. 3 songs, 2 of them her own compositions, showcased just how multifaceted she truly was. On stage, she earned critical acclaim. 2 Best Actress nominations from the Sarah Siddons Awards in Chicago proved her talents extended far beyond TV and film. Productions like Kicks & Co. and The Blacks revealed a performer who could hold any stage, any crowd. Television welcomed her back later in life with open arms. On NBC's Heroes, she portrayed Nana Dawson, a tough grandmother navigating a post-Katrina world with resilience and love. The character bore little resemblance to the spacefaring Uhura, yet felt equally iconic, proof of Nichols's adaptability and emotional depth. Even as the years passed, Nichols never stopped working. But Nichols wasn't content to be a symbol. She became a force. After the final episode faded to black, she turned her gaze from fiction to reality. Her new mission? To bring real-life diversity to NASA. And she did it. She opened doors for the likes of Dr. Sally Ride and Colonel Guion Bluford, pioneers who may never have had the opportunity without Nichols's fierce advocacy. The list of those she inspired reads like a hall of fame for American space history. Judith Resnick, Charles Bolden, Ronald McNair, Frederick Gregory, Lori Garver. Their milestones were her victories too. She didn't just talk the talk. She walked into boardrooms, campaigns, and scientific councils. And in 2015, she flew aboard a special NASA mission, gazing down at Mars and Saturn from above Earth. That flight wasn't just symbolic, it was poetic. For a woman who brought the stars closer through a screen, she now stood among them. And while the universe applauded, so did the fans. Nichols always made time for them, shaking hands, sharing stories, and offering encouragement. Every word from her felt like a promise to keep going, to never stop dreaming. Her music albums reflected the same spirit, one dipped in nostalgia, the other in futuristic dreams. She was a woman of many talents, and she wore them all gracefully. In her final years, her legacy deepened through honesty. She revealed a brief romance with Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, which ended when she discovered his growing bond with Majel Barrett. Yet, time tempered the pain. At his memorial, she honored him by writing and performing Gene, a soulful farewell. There was also Sammy Davis Jr., whose fleeting yet intense relationship with Nichols left a spark that never fully dimmed. She married twice, briefly with Foster Johnson, with whom she had a son, and later with Duke Mondi. Neither marriage lasted, but both left chapters in her complex personal story. But perhaps the most haunting chapter was her brother Thomas's involvement with the Heaven's Gate cult. His tragic end in 1997 shocked the world and pierced Nichols's heart. Still, even amidst loss, she found joy. One radiant memory came in 2012, when she met President Barack Obama. He confessed with a grin that he'd once had a crush on her. That moment, simple yet profound, reminded her that her impact had transcended screens, generations, and even politics. But behind the curtain, her health was quietly unraveling. A minor stroke in 2015 marked the beginning of a difficult decline. By 2018, dementia dimmed the brilliant mind that once lit up the screen. Legal battles followed. Her manager, once a trusted figure, was accused of mismanaging her care. Her son Kyle stepped in, seeking conservatorship to protect her well-being. Yet even that was contested. Friends, like Angelique Fawcett, raised alarms, adding layers of complexity to an already heartbreaking time. Nichols passed away on July 30th, 2022, in Silver City, New Mexico. She was 89. Her ashes, fittingly, were launched into deep space, alongside Majel Barrett, and visual effects legend Douglas Trumbull, a final journey as boundless as her legacy. Throughout her life, Nichols enjoyed a touch of Hollywood elegance. She once owned a collection of classic luxury cars, including a sleek silver Mercedes and a vintage Cadillac convertible that she often drove to events. Her taste in watches leaned toward Cartier and Rolex, blending timeless style with subtle opulence. Real estate included a charming LA bungalow and a spacious desert retreat. Though she didn't own a private jet, she frequently flew first class and had access to chartered flights during major appearances. Her financial footprint included modest but strategic investments in arts foundations and aerospace firms. She also held insurance policies that safeguarded her health, estate, and public appearances. A reflection of someone who understood the cost of fame and the need to protect it. Her lifestyle teaches us this: build with purpose,